Welcome everyone again to Final Cut Pro Hub Live. Thanks for bearing with me. If you're watching this live, we had a little technical thing just a minute ago, but we're back on, ready to go. And what we're talking about is a couple different topics here, but I did get a question just a few minutes ago that I wanted to cover. And essentially what the person is doing is they're creating a split screen, similar to what I created here just a minute ago. And you can see there's a couple clips on the screen, just using the transform tool to move those around. And they wanted a title to show up on one of the clips, and they want to be able to move that title with the various clips. So I did it here just a minute ago in the demo, but we're going to break this apart and see how you can create this. And so on the timeline here, I've actually created a compound clip with this clip that's in the lower left corner right now. And there's a name and a description, just a really basic title on top of it. If I double click on this compound clip, it opens it up. And I can see here's the title and the actual clip below it. So if I wanted to edit the text, I can do that here. Maybe this is the person's name, but maybe we don't need a description. We can double click on this and delete the description out of there. With the name, since it's kind of a very light background there, I'm going to change the text color here. We're going to make this dark. We're going to bring my color picker over. We'll bring that down, make that black. And then we can rearrange this color here, or this name. Now that it is black, it's easier to see with that color and position it where we want it to be. Now this, I'm doing this right on the video clip here, but you could certainly move this title anywhere. You could have it right below the clip if you wanted to, or somewhere else. But in this case, we're going to drop it there right on the clip, and we have that name ready to go. I might want to adjust the length of the title and get rid of these gap clips in the beginning and the end. Don't need that. And then I can go back to my clip here. So now notice lower left corner, we have a video clip with a title clip laid on top of it. So very nice, because this compound clip can now be moved independently using the transform tool here in the lower left corner. You can move this entire compound clip, which means that both the video clip and the title that's inside of there are going to move together. And that's a great way just to keep things organized with your clips there. You don't have to do this step of using a compound clip to group those. You can certainly just lay a title right on top of the video to have that scene. So let's do that. Let's do that with a couple of clips here, just so you can see what that process looks like. I'm going to use Command 0 to reset my interface back to the default layout. So if you've made a whole bunch of adjustments to the way your interface looks, and it doesn't look exactly what it does here, just use that Command 0 shortcut. It'll reset it so that you have the browser at the top left here and the timeline at the bottom. In the top left area, just go to the third little tab here. This is your titles and generators sidebar. And under the title section, we're going to grab a title. Now you can use any title you want, but in this case, I'm going to go to my lower thirds, because the lower third titles are essentially used for, in most cases, with names, and will show up right on our video clip then. Now we should be seeing those. You can see it's doing something a little weird where I'm not actually seeing them. If I click on them, they show up. This may be because of my new setup here. So if something weird like that happens, not a big deal. Just quit Final Cut, use Command Space to bring up your Spotlight search, start typing in Final Cut and hit return, and it'll relaunch Final Cut there. So then again, notice now all those titles show up. Weird little glitch there. I find a lot of those recently. I believe it's with my streaming software that I'm using. But anyway, we got the lower thirds here. We have our different categories for what we're going to use. So I'm just going to select the basic lower third, and I'm going to drag it down. And in my timeline here, just to show you, what I'm going to do is add a title for this cutting pizzas clip. And if I select my transform tool here, I can actually see this is the clip at the top left of this square. So I know I want the title to be on that clip. So when I drag this basic lower third down to the timeline, you want to make sure that this purple line here that represents that title is above the cutting pizzas clip. And so once I do that, I can line that up on that clip there. I recommend turning on snapping with the letter N. That'll make this easier to line things up right there. Notice that yellow snapping line. And I can drag the end of this title so it's right on the whole length there. And so now, looking in my viewer here, let me zoom into it here. notice we have name and description in the lower left corner here in white text. That is our new title. So on the timeline, I'm going to click on the basic lower third to select it. And on the inspector here on the right side, right now at the top left here, I'm in the titles or text inspector. I can change the text, font, size, all that stuff if you want to. And then you can go to the title inspector, this one on the left, to change any of the published parameters. This is just a basic lower third, so there's nothing too exciting there. But then under the third inspector here, this is your video inspector here. This is where we're going to transform and move that text. So I'm going to move it over with the X and then up on the Y here, because this is going to be onto that pizza clip here up at the top left corner. Again, I'm using the transform controls here in the inspector. You can, with the transform tool active in the lower left corner here of the viewer, you can move this around visually here on the viewer. There's no problem with doing that. The reason I'm using the inspector here to move it is I like seeing these numbers. These numbers for the position X and Y allow me to line things up. So if you're doing a grid setup where you have multiple clips like you have here, you may want everything lined up very precisely. So by using the transform tool, you can go in here and actually type in very specific numbers to line up all of your clips there. However, in this case, just doing it kind of rough, so that looks okay. I can double click on the text here to actually change in the name. If I want to put in a different name there, I can do that. And in the text inspector here, I can then change the size of it. So I might want to shrink that down. And if I scroll down, I can go down to the face section here, hit show, and change the color of it. So a couple ways you can change the color. You can click on the actual well here where this white block is of the color, or you can hit the little drop down triangle to the right of it, and it actually pops up all the colors. This is a very fast way just to select a different color. So maybe we want what color stands out? Maybe we'll do just like a dark blue. And then if I don't want a description, I can just double click on the description here to select it, hit the delete key to remove that text. And then maybe I go back to the video inspector to adjust it so that the at Final Cut Pro help tag there is towards the bottom of that clip. Okay, so just to review so far, we've added this title clip above the clip that it's going to be laid on top of it, because Final Cut looks top down, meaning whatever clips are on the top are going to be visually in the viewer on top of or in front of the clip below it. And so that's all you have to do to answer that question that came in through the email. That's what you want to do there. You can then take it a step further where you select both of these clips and actually group these by right-clicking on it and saying New Compound Clip, or use Option G. Make sure you name these compound clips to stay organized, and then click OK. And what making the compound clip does is it essentially grouped that title and text with the video clip. So now, if you're not set on the grid that you have here, this makes it a lot easier to reorganize it, because you can just select this one clip and move them around here. So now I'm moving all of those essentially clips that are inside that, which in this case is just the video and the text in there. So hopefully that makes sense. The one last tip I want to talk about with the compound clips is you can, if you want, take this another step forward. This person that emailed me, they have a whole choir. So there were at least, I think, 10 different people on the screen at the same time. If you're working with a large group like that, you may want to even start grouping these smaller video clips, which you can certainly do. So for example, if on the left side here I have these 3 different clips, if these 3 clips all go together, I can select all 3 of them holding Command. As those are the 3 clips on the left side here. Again, right click or use Option G to create a compound clip. You could name this. So if this is a specific group in that choir, you could name and label what that group is and hit OK. And that'll group all of those together. And now you can move all 3 of those together at the same time. So kind of makes it nice because you're able to adjust those. And if you need to go in and adjust something very specifically, as opposed to doing the entire compound clip, just double click on your compound clip, double click on the one you want to adjust, and now you can make an adjustment. Maybe we want that name at the top left. And then when I use the back arrow here, go back, 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 I'm back at the main level. Notice that name is at the top left now of that clip, and I still have the option to move those around. So definitely get used to those compound clips. That's a great way to organize and adjust things. And I hope that answers that question on the email there of how you can add text in a grid like this. That's the way you do it. Just add your title clip right on top of what's there. The key is to make sure that you're organizing these layers here. All right, so that was a last minute question that came in there. I do have a couple other topics that I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk about 4 different things. If you do have any specific questions, feel free to drop them down into the chat there. So first topic we'll go into that's planned here is how to slide in text from off the screen. So it's kind of related to what we've been doing here with layering text and putting things. You might have individual text that you want to start off of the screen that no one can see, and then you want it to slide in so you can see it. We'll talk about that, which will kind of lead into using the transform tool a little bit more, which we used a bunch in this little opening video here, but we'll talk about using that transform tool to animate text and to move it around, including adding keyframes. Keyframes is such an important topic inside of Final Cut when you're talking about animation. Any kind of movement, keyframes are going to be involved there. And we'll keep building off of this little grid that we've created here using all of these topics here. After that, I want to go into creating an intro. A lot of you are streaming on Instagram or YouTube or other platforms, and you have an intro that you want to create. We're going to create a very, very basic intro for the purposes of building it into a template library, which will be our final topic there. And that template library is something you can then reuse over and over and over again. So if you are an influencer, if you're someone that is on Instagram and you're creating little 40, 60-second videos that you're posting, you might be posting those every single day. And I have people that do that, and they make a new library every single video that they create, which is totally fine. You might not want to reuse that stuff, so creating a new library is a great way to go. However, there's a lot of things that you may reuse, like that intro we're going to create, and I'll show you how to use a template library to make all that happen. All right, so let's go into the first thing. We're going to talk about sliding text in from off the screen. This is a fairly simple process that you can do at any time. Now, to start out, at the top right of the viewer here, you'll notice that I have a reset and a done button. This means my transform tool is currently active. I'm gonna click on done just so that that's no longer active. All right, if you see that, just hit done so it's no longer active. Use Command 0 to reset the interface back to the default layout, and that's where I am right now, and we'll go from here. So first thing I need to do to have text slide in from off the screen is I need to actually create the text. So to do that, we're going to go to the Titles and Generators sidebar at the top left corner here of the Final Cut interface. It's a little T icon here with the generator behind it. Just like we did before a second ago, we have all of our titles then listed on the left side. Now, these are all categories and things that were built into Final Cut that came with it for free. You should see all of this content here. You may have more categories if you've gotten third-party things. That's totally fine too. These titles are very customizable. So if you click on any of these, over on the right side here, you're going to see a little tiny window with maybe a preview of what it looks like. Don't feel like you're just stuck with what you see there. A lot of these titles can be customized even further. So what I'm going to do here is just add some very basic 3D text. So I'm going to click on the 3D titles, and I'm going to go to where it says Basic 3D. And I'm going to click and drag this down onto my timeline. And I'm just having it all the way on the top. So it's above all of these other clips. That way this 3D text is overlaid visually and in front of every other piece of text there. I want this text to extend the entire length of my project. So I'm going to click on the end here and drag that all the way to the right. That way it goes all the way to the end of the project. Now if I scrub through this, skim through it, you can see that text in the middle there, it just says Basic 3D, goes the entire way. So how do we make this text slide in from off the screen and onto it? With the text selected in the timeline, so it's got that yellow outline, I'm just going to double click on it here to change the text. So I'll put our tag on here, why not, our handle. And there's a couple ways to make this text slide in from off the screen. And you may go into the inspector here after you edited the text like I just did, and go down and see a position option, rotation, all these options. So you might be tempted here to go to the position and adjust the position for animation. I caution you on doing this because you can run into issues with the text being cropped out. So instead of changing this position, if I just want this to animate off the screen onto the screen, I'm going to go into the video inspector here, this third one over, and I'm going to use the transform controls here to animate this text. So again, if you just want this to go from left and slide onto the text, we can take our position here, and we have our X and Y positions to make adjustments. The X is basically your left and right. So if I want this to start on the left side and slide in, I'm just going to drag this number way down so it's off to the left of the screen. And this number that's actually here is going to vary depending on your project. So it's not a one number fits all. But now that's over off the left side of the screen. If I skim through the project here, notice that text never shows up. And that's because it's over here. It's way on the left side. You can click on the percentage up at the top right here and take this down to like 12.5%. And notice here, you'll see over on the left side, there's our text. That's where our text is over on the left. Okay, so with that text, we want this to animate onto the screen. So there's a couple ways to do that. I can change this position, notice the X position, so it slides on into the center of the screen. And that's what we're gonna do. But to do that, in order for that text to slide on, what we actually have to do is add a keyframe to this position. So the keyframes are in time. Okay, it's specific to a specific frame or piece of time in your project. And this can be very confusing. So what I recommend doing is turning on the video animation. This is a feature in Final Cut that makes it easy to see those keyframes on your timeline. To do that, you can right click on your clip or control click if you don't have a right click. And there's an option to show the video animation. You can see here the shortcut Control V will also bring this up. Now the video animation is this large area here, which because this is a title, it's purple. And this shows us keyframes on the timeline. So right now I don't have any keyframes, but I want a keyframe for where this title is so that it's over here. And I actually want that keyframe near the beginning of my clip. So what I'm going to do is drag the playhead towards the beginning, and then I'm going to add a keyframe. And we're adding a keyframe to the position. To do that, there's this little diamond button here, and if you hover over it, it'll show a little plus sign. This adds a keyframe. So click on that button, and notice that little yellow diamond comes up. Lets us know we've added a keyframe for this number on the position at this moment in time. Notice it also put this keyframe right at the beginning of our clip here on our transform tool. So it's letting us know we have a keyframe there. And again, if this is confusing, that's normal. If you're not used to this, that's totally okay. Because keyframes and dealing with this, there's so many different components to it, so it can be a little confusing. So now essentially what I've done is added a keyframe to my text position at the beginning of this clip. So now I'm going to move my playhead a little bit further down. I'll be about 2 seconds into the project. I'm going to go up to my clip and I'm going to change the position so that it slides it over into the middle. And you can just start dragging this number if you want. You can also double click on it. And I know that I want this centered, so I'm going to hit the number 0 and return, and that'll move that text right into the center. Notice on the right side, it automatically added a keyframe. We get that little gold diamond both here on the right side of the position, and because I'm showing the video animation on the timeline, you can see there's a new diamond on the timeline there. So we have one at the beginning and then one a little bit further down there. Okay, so if I skim back through this, notice the text slides off to the left side. It also does some other weird stuff there at the end there, which is, we're going to take a look at that and see why it's sliding up there. But if I do Shift Z in my viewer here, we can see what that looks like, and it's essentially off on the left, and then it slides in to the center. Okay, so that is how you can make text slide from one spot of the screen, whether it be off of the screen onto the screen, or if we want to do the reverse, we can have it slide from the middle here off to the right. And the way that I would do that is move my playhead where I want it to start sliding, which we'll say is right here. I'm going to hit the add keyframe button, which is that little diamond button to the right of position. Hit add keyframe. And then go down a little bit further on my timeline, because notice we do have the one keyframe. And then maybe at this moment in time, at 20 seconds, I want the text to be all the way to the right of the title. So I can click and drag that off to the right side. Just a big number. And now notice that text then slides off to the right side. Okay. Might be a little bit confusing, but hopefully that helps. One little thing just to address right now, we'll just take care of it. The reason this text is kind of like blew up here is the basic 3D title has a little animation in it. So I can actually go into my published parameters here under the title inspector, and the build-in is that animation in. I'm just going to uncheck the build-in. We don't need a build-in, and we don't really need to build out either. Just disable those. So cool. So now if I play this, I'll hit the space bar. We'll see that text on the left side slides in. It's going to stay there for the duration of the project. And then at the end, we have those 2 keyframes to slide that text off. Again, the reason I brought up the video animation here was just so you could visually see where those keyframes are on the timeline for our transform tool here. But you can also use this video animation to change where those keyframes are in time. So that makes it really nice. You can't do that really anywhere else in Final Cut easily. So if you want the animation, for example, this slide on text to come on really quickly, I would just take this second keyframe, drag it to the left. And now if I play this back, text slides on really quickly. And same thing at the end. If I want it to slide out really quickly, I'm just going to move those 2 keyframes closer together, and you'll see how that slides off. All right, so now if you're trying to get used to this, if this is a new concept for you, practice, practice, practice. That's what you want to do with this, because it can be a tricky topic to work with and get used to. So let's dive in a little bit deeper, though. I do want to talk more about this transform tool and how it interacts and creates those keyframes. So because this is a confusing topic, it's just kind of, we've used the transform tool a little bit, and we've made a couple keyframes, but let's see it in a little bit more detail. I'm going to hit the X here to close the video animation for that Final Cut topic. And then I'm going to grab one of my video clips. Let's add this, let's do the pizza toppings clip. So the pizza topping clip is this one on the left side. If I hit the letter V with that clip selected, it'll disable it. Actually, it's one on the top here. So V disables it so we can see which clip that is. The clip kind of goes grayed out on your timeline. Just hit the letter V again with it selected. It'll re-enable that clip. So if I want to animate this clip, I can do it using the inspector, which I've done a bunch in this video. But you also have in the lower left corner of your viewer the transform tool, which is this little one all the way in the left corner. There's a drop-down menu next to it that allows you to change this to a crop tool or even a distort tool. So if you've done that at some point, maybe you hit a key on accident, this icon in the lower left may look different, and that's completely okay. Just click on it and hit the transform tool to change it back to that transform tool. Notice how right now it is purple. Purple lets us know that tool is active. If I click it again, it goes to a white tool, letting us know it's not enabled. So that's what those colors mean. Every color really is there for a reason. But with the transform tool active in the viewer here, I can click and drag on the clip to move it around and change where that position is. You can also grab any of the corners of a clip to adjust the scale of it and the size. You can grab just one edge if you want to. When you're dragging, you can hold things like Option to change how it scales. So without holding anything, it's scaling from the middle of the clip. But if you hold Option, it scales from the opposite corner that you're dragging from, which can help, especially if you're creating a grid. If you hold Shift when you're dragging, you can manipulate the size. It no longer locks the scale. So you have a lot of options when you're changing your clip there. You can hold Option and Shift to combine both of those as well. So that is a couple little tips about that tool and what you can do with the transform tool. In the middle, you do get your rotate options there, and you can change things like the anchor point and some other things here in the tool. But as far as adding keyframes with the transform tool, you can do that as well. At the top left corner, you get the Add Keyframe button, which a couple minutes ago we used over here. We used the right to the right of the parameter. We clicked on these little diamonds to add a keyframe, but you can do it at the top left of a clip in the viewer with it selected using your Add Keyframe button here at the top left. So without using the inspector, we can do the same thing we did with the text, where this clip slides off of the screen and slides onto it. Now to do this, we do want to use our timeline, because again, keyframes and the time that you have is very important. So make sure you know where you are with your playhead in the timeline. Just to visualize this, I'm gonna use my Control V shortcut for video to show the video animation window. And that way you'll be able to see the keyframes that are added as I do different transforms. Now, if I just place the playhead randomly and I select my clip and I move it here in the viewer, there's no keyframe that's been added. Notice there's no keyframe down here. If you look to the right side of any of these parameters, there's no keyframe. And if I look at the top left corner, no change here as well. However, if I want there to be a keyframe, if I want animation, I'm gonna hit the Add Keyframe button, which is that little diamond button there. Now notice on the right side of all these parameters, that actually added a keyframe for all of the transform parameters at once. And this little icon at the top left corner has a little X there. The X is nice because it lets you delete that keyframe. If you didn't mean to hit a keyframe there, you can hit that X and notice it removes it for all of the transform parameters at the same time. But in this case, I'm going to hit that Add Keyframe button. Notice on the timeline in the animation, it added the keyframe right at this moment in time. That's very important that you know where you are on your timeline when you're adding keyframes, because that means no matter what, when we get to, 8 minutes and 18 seconds on the project, this clip is going to be rotated in the lower left corner. If I go back a little bit, maybe a little bit earlier in the clip, and select it, I can use the transform tool now to move that clip somewhere else. And as I move it, because I'm using the transform tool, notice we get that red line around, which actually lets us see the path that this clip's going to take. And on our video animation, we see the keyframe's been added there as well. So pretty straightforward there. Not too much else to worry about. And again, I can drag it forward and move the clip again. Go a little bit further, move it again. And now as I skim through the project, it's animated around and it's actually following that path. Just to make this a little bit easier to see, with a clip selected, you can go up to the clip menu here, and there's an option to solo that clip. Option S is the shortcut. We were disabling clips before using V. But I can use Option S to solo this clip. This makes this animation process a little bit easier to work with because you can select this clip and soloing it will eliminate those other ones there as far as those things are concerned. So we'll do those ones, get rid of all that, hide that so you can see our little animation that we've done here. Now each of these keyframes, if you want to, you can go down and click on a keyframe. And if you right click on this keyframe, you can change it between being a smooth keyframe to being linear. And the little icon tries to tell you what this is going to be, but linear just means it's going to be straight line. So you have a straight line coming into the keyframe and a straight line going out of it. These like watch hands, or there's no smoothness, there's no curve to this point. Once it hits that keyframe and that point in time, it's just going to immediately take a left turn and go to its next spot. If I go back to smooth, you're going to see these Bezier handles, which allows you to make a curved change there. So instead of it just hitting this corner and taking a turn, it's going to smoothly get to this point on the in the viewer here, and then kind of make a gradual turn as opposed to just immediately going the next way. If you hold Option, you can change just one of the handles at a time. The further you drag this handle out, the more gradual of a change you can make. So going out or closer to the point does have a difference there. And you'll see with snapping turned on, it's going to snap to various items there. Cool. So that is part of the animation with adding those keyframes, and it's very important that you follow those and understand what each of those things are there. All right, so I think that should answer using the transform tool and how you can get it with the keyframe button there. So let's go on to the next thing. We have creating an intro. This is something that's fairly straightforward when you're working with a project. It can be complex if you're not really sure what you want to create. But as far as creating an intro, it just depends on how you want it to look. So I'm going to start from scratch and just create a very basic intro scene that you might want to have. So I'm going to create a project, and this is just going to be called my intro. And I'll hit return there to get my OK active. Now let's create a kind of a basic intro here. Now for this, I do have my stock library that I've been using, and I have my snowboarding library, but in this case, we kind of just want to start from scratch because I could take an intro that's here and move it to a different project, but really I want to start from scratch on this stuff. So to do that, I'm going to right-click on my snowboarding library, hit Close Library, right-click on my stock library, hit Close Library, and now I'm going to go up to File, say New Library. So we're just starting from scratch with this one, and I'm going to call this maybe this is my Instagram stream. So I'll name my library here and hit save. And there we have an empty library with nothing in it. And I want to create an intro, so I'm going to hit my new project. I'm just going to call it my intro. And now we'll build an intro. And this might have your title, it might have your handle, it might have various things there. So I can go up to my titles and generator sidebar. We'll just create we'll do a custom 3D title. And you want to select the size of your video depending on what you're using. So if it's for Instagram, you might do a 1920 by 1080. If it's an Instagram square video, you might go down to custom and do 1080 by 1080. At least as of right now, it does it. 1080 by 1080, you can choose your frame rate based on where you're at. I'll choose 30 frames for the US here. And there I have a little project with my custom 3D text there. And let's say that this has my handle on it. Get a little bit smaller so the text fits on there. And then let's say that we want this to be animated. So I can select my title with the playhead at the beginning. I can go into my inspector under the video inspector, raise, let's just have it drop down. So I'll raise this up to the top, hit the add keyframe. I'm going to go just a few frames in, maybe 1 second. I'm going to have this drop down to 0, so it's in the center of the frame there. It'll stay there for about 2 seconds, we'll say. So I'm going to hit add keyframe and then move this to the end, and we'll have it drop down. Okay, very basic. This is not anything too special. If I play this back, we can see title drops down, stays there for a sec, and then drops all the way down. So looks pretty good. Maybe now I want to get my logo because you've created a logo, so I can use Command I to bring up my import window here. And let's see, I think on my external here, I have a logo, so I can go into my files, grab my logo. Let's say it's this one. I think I got one with some transparency on it. Let's try to grab one of those. And we'll import that into my project. Here's my logo, drag that down. And then we can do the same thing and animate this one. So go to the beginning. I'll scale this down a little bit, drag this up. We'll have it slide down with the text. I'll add a keyframe to the position. Scale is going to stay the same, so that should be fine. Drag this over, scale this. Sorry, adjust the position here so that's at the top. That stays there with the text. And then maybe we add a keyframe here to both the position and the scale. And then when the text drops off, I want the logo here to actually go down, shrink down a little bit, and go over to the lower right corner just so that I have kind of like a watermark on the videos that I create. And if you want, top right corner, click View, go down to Show Title and Action Safe Zone. These safe zones can be a good guide for you on where to adjust things. For digital content like Instagram, it's not as important, but for other mediums, this inner line is your title safe area, and that's where you really want to keep text. Now I'm going to do Command minus a couple times to zoom out on my timeline here. I want this logo to remain while the video is up, so I might extend this out to the length of all of your clips. If you know all of your clips are about 30 seconds, and that's what you're going to use every time you create a video, and that's what you want. You got your little intro and your logos then on that clip. And that's all you have to do. And so now we have a little intro and really a watermark here with the logo being on the top. And that's how you create an intro. You just kind of piece together those various parts to that video to create it. Now, the whole point of creating this intro is so that you can reuse it over and over, and that's where the template library comes in. So now that you've created a library, and you saw we created that from scratch, we want to clean this up so that it's ready to go when you actually start to build your videos. So to do that, first start at the top left corner. You have your library name up here. Let me get rid of my various topics here just so you can see the clip here. So top left corner, this is your library, and I would recommend naming it. So this is going to be our App Final Cut Pro library, but I'm actually going to call it the App Final Cut Pro Help template library. So just double click on it, and that allows you to change the name there of the clip. You might have to click once, wait a second, then click again. But we'll just call it template. So it's my template library, hit return, got it. This is the event down here that's got the date on it. So same thing, click, wait a second, click, and you can just call this your event. When you're using these template libraries, you may only have one event, so it's not as important to name the event something specific. If you use multiple events, get into naming those things as well. And then we have our project. So this would be our video, and you may only have one video per template. So you can just call it video if it's just the one video. If you do have multiple ones, again, make sure that you are naming those things accurately just so you don't run into issues. Cool, so we have a video, we have our logo is in here. If there's any other media that you regularly use, think of this as music. If you regularly use certain music or other clips, other images that you want to reuse in every single one of your videos, make sure to put all of these in this library that you're going to essentially have as your template library. Once your template library is ready to go, you might have your project and everything. If this is ready to go, you're done. There's nothing else to do at this point to get this set up. Now, how do you actually use the template library? So the top left corner of your library, right click on it and choose this option that says Reveal in Finder. This is going to go and bring up a Finder window and show us where this library is. And I like to go up to the View menu and turn on the path bar where it says Show Path Bar. You can use Option Command P as the shortcut. And the path bar is this one at the bottom. This shows me where this library is stored. So this template library that I created is saved in Movies, in my Home folder, which yours is going to have your name there, Users, Macintosh HD. If you want, this library can be stored on an external drive, external storage device, totally fine. And you can move it too. You can just drag it from here in the Finder and move it to another drive. So I have an external SSD drive here. I could just click and drag this to the external drive, drop it, and it copies it over there. These are all SSD drives, and there's not much media in there, so it copied almost immediately. If you have a bunch of larger clips, it may take time for that to copy over. Now, that's kind of where the library is stored. Go ahead and quit Final Cut Pro. You should not have Final Cut Pro, in my opinion, open while you're managing your libraries, because we're actually going to make copies of this. So whether it be from the external drive here, or if it's in your Movies folder, this is how you're going to use your template library. Because right now, this library is the template. So if we're going to use it, we're going to use Command D on the shortcut to duplicate that library. Now that it's duplicated, double click on it to open it, or click and then click again to rename it. So you can either rename it when it's open or rename it here in the Finder. Either or. Just make sure you keep these named something so that you know what they are. A lot of you that are doing social media postings, you're going to be posting maybe daily or weekly. So instead of this being our template library, this may be week 1 template. This may be your week 1 library. If you do 52 of those each week, you can have it there. If it's for a specific date, make sure to put the date in there. So if this is for January 1st, 2021, you can put that in there. Just get some kind of a naming convention so you can keep these things organized. Because if I quit Final Cut, notice back here in the Finder, we're going to get tons of these libraries. Regardless of what way you look at these clips, you're going to start to get a lot of these libraries. And if they don't have a name on it, it can get very confusing of what those are. All right. But this is a template library, so now we have that. We're set and ready to go. The one, I guess last little shortcut, I haven't tried this, but with the template library selected, if you do Command I, you're going to get information about this file here. And you can go into it and try locking the file so that it can't be changed. But it can get a little messy with how you're working with it. But just keep in mind that this template library, it can be very easy. I mean, notice right here, I have 4 different libraries. If I'm viewing them as icons, they can get blended together. So just make sure you keep an eye on where your template library is and understand inside of Final Cut Pro, when you get back there, which library you're in. That's such a key thing to understand and make sure that you're not messing up the library that you don't want to. Make sure you're in the correct one. And to do that, just top left corner, if you've named your libraries, it's very easy. I can see, okay, I'm in the Final Cut Pro Help January 1st, 2021 library, right? I know exactly which library that is. I'm not getting confused. And so that's a huge part of it. If you don't name it, and I see this, everyone that reaches out to me for support, it seems like, have untitled projects, untitled events, untitled stuff. If all of your stuff is just called untitled, you're not going to stay organized. You will have problems, and don't be surprised if you lose something. But check out the other videos on this channel regarding backup, events, and media organization. We have a whole live stream on that as well, and that should make it a little bit easier. But hopefully this answers that question of how to create a template library, and you can reuse that for all of your various projects, and you'll just keep refining it. We created a very basic intro here. As you continue to use that library over and over again, it'll start to grow. You'll get much better things over time. Cool. I guess the one last thing to talk about with this, as far as media goes, if you do use music, pictures, logos like we did here, that media needs to be stored inside the library. That's going to make things easiest for you. You don't have to do this, but I strongly encourage storing all of that media inside the library, which just simply means if you select the library, go up to File, there's an option to Consolidate Library Media, and this will go through and move any of that media into this Final Cut library, make it easy to move around different drives there. So go ahead and try it out. Let me know if you have any questions with that. You can send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com or leave a comment down below.